Homies, welcome to a very special interview of the week. With me this week is Unbanksy, the head of product at OlympusDAO. How are you going, Unbanksy?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for the intro. I didn't know I was the head of product, but cool.
I don't know, are you? Isn't that what people call it? Someone called you that one time.
Yeah, maybe.
No, or coordinator? Something.
Coordinator.
What do you call yourself?
I like to say we don't have roles in the DAO.
Right.
Yeah, I call
a contributor.
Exactly. I'm Glue's alt.
Yes. Is it just like a coordination role? Like mostly people operate by themselves, but they need like someone who's kind of across like lots of different bits and pieces to give them a steer?
I feel like that's definitely part of the job description. I'd like to think that, where is the product going, right? Like, where is Olympus going as a whole? And nobody knows that. It's up to the community, but there are certain like patterns that are starting to emerge. And my kind of like thing is that I want to codify, I want to transcribe these patterns into written form. And so, that kind of forms the basis of the product vision and a cohesive explanation of how everything fits together and how that together defines how we're going to get to our vision of being a global, decentralized, community-run reserve currency.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe you can give us like your background. Like, were you in something before crypto, and then like, how do you fall into it?
I, like everybody, I kind of learned about Bitcoin in 2013.
I don't think that's everybody, man.
Okay, that's true. I guess I didn't act on it, right? Like for the longest time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my whole thing that I tell people is that like when Silk Road was around, you could buy drugs, that like I did that, got something from Amsterdam and I paid a Bitcoin for it, And so in fact, it was like 0.8 Bitcoin. And so like I had maybe like 0.2 Bitcoins left over and I was thinking of like, tracking the movements and it, going up to 400, crashing down to 200, just kind of like made me very like anxious. So I decided to sell the 0.2 Bitcoins and I sold it for like $200.
You were anxious about the $200
Actually, 40
investment?
Yes, exactly. Back in the day, and so,
Yeah.
a few years go by and ETH launches, right? And so suddenly, my brother was reaching out to me. We don't really talk much, but he reached out to me. My friend is like telling me, hey, like Ethereum launched, like check if you have any. And I was like, I don't really like care about crypto. It was just like, why would I even sign up for something? Anyway, so I go to this wallet and I like still remember the password. Like I don't even know how I was able to keep track of this data, but I logged in and it turns out I do have ETH and I had bought like during the Genesis sale.
You forgot that you bought it?
Yes, because I was like, it was just kind of thing that you're exploring the world, you're on Hacker News, you do a lot of random shit, and then like you like that's kind of how I am. I just do a lot of random shit and then I forget about it, and then hope that like it comes back to me.
Everything works out.
Yeah, exactly. Like like I'm myself am a Ponzi, just constantly growing and figuring shit out on the. But so anyways, I'm like like amazing. For me, it was a lot of money. I come from a poor background and it was just like, oh my God, I've never seen that much money before. So I used that money to start, just dump it all on the market because I'm like, crypto isn't going anywhere, and I used the proceeds to start a company, like a startup, right? So before that, I've done a few startup. This one ended up going nowhere, but it led to a pivot that did end up going somewhere, and it was just had an exit. When you look at kind of the reward to the risk that you're taking, like I was taking massive risks, but ultimately I think the return in doing the startup and going through the pain and what I've learned outweighs in all aspects me just holding the ETH that I got from Genesis. Then in 2020 or 2019 again, my friend, I have this friend that just consistently pesters me about crypto. And so he gets me back into crypto. And, I really didn't want it, right? Like I wanted to build my company. I want to just do stuff in the normal world. And so eventually I'm kind of like, I start playing around with like compound, I take out loans, I start doing like, borrowing ETH,
Yeah.
and realizing
Balancer
that,
launches like two couple of days later, you're like, oh, maybe I'll get
yeah,
some. Yeah.
yeah. And so eventually I start, we get to this point where it's like algorithmic stablecoins 2.0. There were these like V1 Ponzi's, and then it became kind of this
DSD.
like, yes, DSD,
Empty set dollar, that was a good one.
right, exactly, like Gaia and things like that. Um, it was kind of like emerging that there was going to be this company called Tribe, with this unique PCV. There was like this random kid, Zeus, that's doing something with Olympus, and
Yeah.
like, and then Frax and things like that. So I jumped into all of those. But really the community, like the thing that really stuck out to me was just the community in Olympus, and specifically a metric I call time to response, TTR,
Yeah.
um, and how quick and often Zeus would respond, often within seconds or minutes, to somebody's query. And I feel like that is one of the few characteristics needed to have a successful, viral, vibrant, and growing community.
So that was like February 2021?
Yeah, yeah, around that time.
So you were just like looking around to like chuck some money and stuff, or you were like looking to get involved? How'd that work?
Yeah, looking to get involved because there was something interesting about these algorithmic stablecoins, right? They're doing, to me, it was like they're doing a very hard math problem, right? It could be control theory, right, where you're trying to like dampen the spring, and those like very interesting, right? And I think like with Olympus, and it took me a few months to understand, but what they're doing is that they're applying mathematics to the system, but they're not applying it at the currency level, which is what Reflexer is doing, right? They're
Yeah.
applying control theory on the currency. What Olympus is doing is applying mathematics, specifically game theory, to the whole system. So all of the incentives and the designs and the configurations are set up in such a way that you will sustain this APY, you will continue bond, and
Do you mean like encourage? It's like incentivizes that behavior, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's you configure the system in such a way that leads the currency to become the reserve currency and to grow, to new heights.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a systemic understanding that Olympus has that all of these other currencies may not.
Mm. So you jumped on, you were chatting with Zeus a bit, like in February. How did it go? Were you just chatting to him for a while and then you're like, hey, can I jump on board?
Yeah, so I mean, the I joined like I may not be doing much engineering today, but like I I started my career learning. I taught myself like how to program, and
Mm.
like I've been starting internet companies, software companies for the past decade. And so like I always, as a just founder, I know how to sit down and just get shit done, define the tasks that needs to get done. And really that's what I came in and I offered Olympus, right? Like they needed somebody with front end experience, right? Vue.js, I actually didn't know, but I told Zeus that like, yeah, I did. It's because I actually had a lot of experience with React and all of the other frameworks. So it's like I didn't lie to him. It was just more that
You had to learn it on the way.
exactly. And I literally did not sleep. Like there would be days where I would just not sleep and just like work and build the app.
Oh, were you the person who built that first website? Is that
Right. Yeah. And so so we were having
so
this,
funny?
yeah, and it's like I would, yeah, okay, anyways, I'm
No, no,
I'm rambling.
go on, tell us, tell us.
All right, this is kind of crazy, but I remember like writing the die bonds code and like deploying it. And just kind of not having slept for like 2 days because I was like had to do this like under like a pressed timeline.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so anyways, I'm like completely like can't like it's lack of sleep, and
Deranged.
then yeah, deranged exactly, and then it goes live, right? And like for 9 minutes, nothing comes in, and it dawns on me that like, oh my God,
No
I
one.
I know I programmed the wrong address.
Oh
And I'm
no.
like the weight of the world just like fell on me. Um,
Was it
and
true? Did
then
you program the wrong address?
it, and then the transaction comes in, and I'm in the
Ah,
clear.
okay.
And
Yeah,
it
nice.
was a great feel, like the biggest,
Relief.
greatest, yeah,
Yeah.
relief, everything.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that first website, the background's like that Roman kind of city Olympus. When I looked at it, I was like, I don't, yeah, I suppose like the community seems real good, but this site is a bit meh.
I hope somebody has a screenshot of that. That's like
History, that's our
records.
history, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So you were like, yeah, I can help out with front end, and then kind of what happens after launch? Like they're like, we gotta build these bonds now, like get to it, like
Yeah, it's basically just continued work on that. There was also talks of starting the DAO and just like, getting that off the ground. And so that I got involved with that, with the OGs. And it was a very interesting challenge because like my whole thesis in life or kind of goal in life is to be able to understand how an idea goes from an idea, or how teams, people, companies go from an idea to launch to MVP to further raising money until they go IPO
this can
and then
happen
past.
much more quickly now, right?
Yeah, yeah, and so it's interesting, like that's kind of like the whole theory, and like be able to understand that very analytically and programmatically. um,
Yeah.
and that to me was interesting to start and help the DAO and figure out what is the best way, given that it's a decentralized anonymous culture. What is the best organization for it? How do we craft it?
So can you tell us maybe about the from Olympus Pro, so from the idea to the launch, like you were heavily involved in that, right?
Yeah. So I would say that like Olympus Pro as a concept came about probably 1 month in to the DAO, maybe even less. The word treasury as a service, if you're familiar with that term,
Mm.
like you
TAS.
task exactly like that was like the talk of town in the early days, and we were trying to like find a product market fit for it, right? Like,
Yeah.
how would this be valuable? And I think it's like the like great ideas of history don't come in like a sleep, or like kind of like as a flash of lightning, like strikes you like a genius. They come through a messy process where it forms in your mind, but then it takes really a few years, maybe months, before you can understand a context of the idea and connect it to other, that then form the basis of like the innovation, right?
Yeah, like a
um,
mycelium network underground.
yeah. Speaking of mushrooms, and so we had Alchemix approach us, and they were basically like, hey, we want to use like your idea of a bond. And so that, I think, you start having these conversations, and then suddenly you start connecting concepts from the past, and then you suddenly realize like, wait a minute, we can actually productize this, launch the contracts, and then have a permissionless system, bonds as a service. That was actually one of the names I used. Like, bonds as a service was, you know, considered like the product name. And then I remember like Jaws was like fighting to have it like Olympus Pro. And so I I think
Very
actually Olympus.
Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually, in retrospect, I love that we chose that name because it's, yeah, it's great.
It's a very attractive name. It's got such power to
Yeah.
it.
I think like the market received it pretty well. I think what was very impressive was really what the DAO did, because this was a DAO project. It didn't come from Zeus. It came from members that were, in the DAO. And so I think that's really, to me, is like kind of the catalyst for the DAO going from unproven to like, you just proved your first, like you have a lot of things to prove, but you just de-risked yourself, or rather you proved yourself with this amazing product.
Yeah. And like the execution risk is out because people know you can ship, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you talk a little bit more about Tyche. I mean, Olympus Give? What are we calling it now?
Yeah. So I'd say Tyche is the primitive, and it facilitates, or it enables Olympus Give. So, like everybody's staking their own, right? So you have SOM, and every 8 hours, you get yield redirected back into your account, right?
Right on. Yeah. That's what I do.
Im- Imagine if you could unwind that redirection and direct it to causes, charities, and individuals that you care about.
Very powerful.
That is Olympus Give.
So what does that unlock? Like,
So a few use cases, right? It starts to open up the OMI economy to new participants. And so you can start having some of the wealth transfer optionally going to new economies, right? There's a lot of OMIs that are getting wealthy, and that's great. Now we're giving them an option to, based on their consciousness or whatever they want to do, to start impacting the world with the yield that they're getting.
you can give it to someone and then they have ohm and then they're like, I like this ohm.
Exactly. So it's both an on-ramp for the next million OMIs. It introduces a social impact angle that allows us to, really bring ohm to the masses.
Yeah.
And bring it in a way that like, hey, you are getting this geom, and this geom is growing. It's your nest egg. You're giving somebody a golden goose. And so, that's to me is pretty exciting. And I think there's also the ability to really help local communities, to help Ethereum, right? Like help fund Ethereum core devs, be able to work with certain partners to, help the environment, solve climate change, right?
Lucky we got that grants committee coming up. They're full of big brain givers.
Well, that's the cool thing, is that you can now start having interoperability between Olympus products. So for example, if somebody goes through grants, they can be qualified and added to the Olympus Give dashboard, so that OMIs can now start redirecting some of their yield. So it basically becomes this regenerative charity, or even, ongoing donation payments from the community that help support these grants projects.
Very cool.
And if as like those partners bring in impact metrics, you can start to have a very like quantitative look at where the money is going, right? And if that's your jam, like that's available for you as well.
I love it. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the incubator.
Oh man, let's talk about the incubator.
So this is an idea. This must have been even in the early days, right? Like been an idea people had.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, like the thing, like I personally don't have a good relationship with VCs. I mean, not that I'm
No one
like,
could tell that from your tweets.
what gave it away, right? It's not like, if I go to a VC club, I get banned, because yeah, it's not that kind of relationship. I'm just saying
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the
Banned from VC
I know,
Club.
right? They're like, oh, we've seen this guy, keep this guy
This
away.
guy on Twitter.
Right? Yeah. But it's just, as a founder, like going through that and being humiliated and being in that like power imbalance really left a bad taste in my mouth, right? And like a lot of people take advantage of that position, and you know, that like it's really uncomfortable, at least for me, right?
Yeah.
And so I understand that there is risk that people are taking. I think how people perceive and abuse that risk imbalance to appear more powerful or more, enlightened than you. I think that's a big problem. So why are we talking about Olympus Incubator, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think if we like the other side of things, that when VCs give you money, at least in my past, that's all they are. They give you money. They don't really offer you advice. Oftentimes, maybe like there might be one meeting in the past 2 years where you might get something insightful, but that's it. And so if VCs equals capital, there is plenty of capital in crypto, and there is no reason for you to give up so much of your equity when the other party isn't offering the same in return.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Like, because you can actually not, I mean, Vault, right? They just they did an angel round, and then they're like, no, we don't want any VCs. Actually, we don't need them.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's definitely that. I think we've had these conversations in the past, and the challenge that we ran up against is that, like, are we a late stage VC, right, where we do a lot of like, private equity type things, or are we more like seed stage and high risk? And in that case, like, what does that mean to be high risk? And I don't think we've actually like figured those out early days. We were very conservative in how we deploy the treasury and how we use the DAO funds. I think we're, with the successes that we've had so far, I think it does feel right to pour on the gas and continue growing as a big organization, but growing at the same pace. Yeah, to really live up to the vision of us being an expansion.
Yeah, definitely. I think incubating, like helping people see their vision, is very Olympus culture as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So where does incubator go from here?
I think there's, we've already seen there's a lot of demand for incubator. And so I think that's definitely one, is to like continue these conversations and finding great projects. Again, I love interoperability, and I think there's something there with Tyche and Incubator that will unlock a new investment fund that can, potentially have community participation and, other crazy ideas like that.
So we've got the kind of incubator, which is at the start, and then there's this mention in the Vault post about upcoming launch products. Can we talk a little bit about them, or are they still under lock and key?
Yeah, well, I think it's just similar to kind of like Incubator, right? Where we can provide the necessary capital, and really the most important thing in the early days is liquidity, right? And so we can provide that initial liquidity, bootstrap that for you, where OWN becomes the dominant pair and you have the governance token. You pair that, and now you're starting off on a strong foot to then directly go into Olympus Pro and bond and start owning your own liquidity.
Yeah. It's like the kind of full stack, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
From again, from like idea to to launch to MVP, like those are the kind of things that we want to build to support founders in their journeys.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to be community run, I think. It's you run into so many problems, right? I mean, but we kind of solve them along the way, but eventually we get to a stage, right, where the treasury assets we take in, if it's sort of controlled by governance, eventually we're going to take in like assets that are in the interests of people with a lot of voting power. Do you think that's the case?
Mm-hmm. That's why it's important to 3-3. Like, if you believe in the future of Olympus, then it's in your interest to control as much governance power as you can. Because for two reasons: A, that you get a lot of governance power, but B, that you prevent your enemies from getting governance power. So there's kind of two ways you can live
Maybe
life.
people
It's
you don't agree with rather than
don't
you
agree. Sorry.
agree.
Yeah, yeah. But exactly. So it's like there's really two incentives that are pulling you in that direction. And again, going back to the analogy, like Olympus is solved like the designed incentive system very deliberately.
So I want to talk about actually the branches of Olympus, right? These two proposals, Lobis and Redacted.
Yeah, I think this is like on par with like how I see crypto systems evolving. You know, there's going to be bands, tribes that come together, have a shared interest in mind, and will use that to accumulate governance power, you know. And so this becomes like a cooperation on a meta level where you're basically trying to coordinate with ideologies, right? And you know, I mean, imagine like Christianity versus like Islam, right? And like, how does one coordinate a peaceful coexistence? Like, what are the incentives there? How do you design them? How do you create systems in Olympus that make that easier? And I think that's an unsolved problem on a human level. I don't know how we're going to solve it on a smart contract level.
Like, does eventually someone make the curve of Ohm and they just aim to like control a lot of Ohm voting power? I suppose
Mhm.
like Rome is kind of that, right?
Convex Olympics
Y-
launching next week.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, right? Because convex are now like it's looking like they're doing it for FXS as well, and
Mhm.
then there's a bunch of other protocols that are kind of going that route, and it's
Yes. Yep.
it's a way to um, kind of ensure there's demand for your token in the near term, and if you have a long enough tail, then those incentives can make you the winner, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's all about liquidity. Like the reason everybody's targeting these governance tokens is it's basically a race for liquidity and getting as much of that as possible, as fast as possible, and maybe as safe as possible, you know,
Because
and
that's the best way to
yeah.
earn money, right? Trading fees. That's the primitive of where a lot of wealth is derived.
Mhm. But also just as protocols, like being able to buy liquidity for cheaper than bonds, that will be in our interest, right?
Mm.
Like we're spending 40% of our ohm to basically accumulate liquidity, right? What if we could do it for 20% or 10% ohm minted? That I think opens up, that helps us scale much faster, and yeah, I mean it helps the industry as well by having the deepest liquidity pools.
Yeah, and maybe we can use our toke as well. So many plugins.
Oh yeah, like it's all composable. We're gonna have a like liquidity on steroids.
Yeah. Can you talk about Proteus? What your thoughts are about Proteus?
Yeah, I mean it's what we need to do, right? I see it. There's kind of like there's patchwork solution and then there's like the solution. Like Proteus is a necessary patchwork. Basically, it helps us expand across chain. So there is going to be geom on those chains, and you will be able to earn additional income by providing that as liquidity pool. And so why does that matter? Well, it's because it helps us bootstrap some of these pools and establishes us on other chains. That's a win-win for Olympus in my mind.
Yeah. But not having the ability to purchase Olympus like wrap stake safely on
Mhm.
other chains, like
Mhm.
being worried that you're going to get affected by slippage or whatever. I think it really has affected people being able to like get on board. Certainly, you see every day in the Discord people complaining about the Ethereum fees, and you know what? They're like right to do so because they are very high.
Yeah,
But like yeah, it's gonna be pretty exciting, I think, to see like because there's treasuries on other chains that they just want to take in some ohm, right? So,
hmm
and
there's a
we
lot of
can't.
demand for
We,
Olympus Pro on
yeah,
all these different chains, and like Ohm, Geom
a
is
very
like
attractive
yeah,
pair.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well, maybe we can finish up with Kusama. I see you tweet about that all the time.
Wait,
What
about who?
Kusama network, is it?
Oh, Kusama.
Kusama, I'm saying it wrong, yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it because I don't really understand it. So the innovation with Polkadot in terms of their economics is that they have these, you can only have so many like chains, like kind of
Yes. So
side
it's
chains or something, parachains they call
yeah,
them.
yeah. If you look at like the comparison to make is like you look at Ethereum and it's basically like a universe of different use cases. And the promise they made is that our infrastructure will support these multitude of use cases. So you can have gaming, DeFi, NFTs, everything. And so like that was the promise. Like it's going to be one big monolith of a world, and the infrastructure will be scalable. And so Polkadot ecosystem took a different approach, which is that like I mean these guys built Ethereum, right? And so like their approach was that like what you really need is you need a different blockchain for each use case. So a domain specific blockchain, right? So and so like what you can start trading off then is like the different parameters that define a blockchain, right? Like maybe there's a certain amount of like validators that you want, right? Or a certain amount of like finality that you want to do if there's like something that's happening on chain. And so you start constructing these various like blockchains that fit the domain that you're working in. And it becomes, and so Polkadot and Kusama are basically these like Legos, right? That you can kind of compose together a blockchain called a parachain. And like maybe the other thing to mention is that like security is offloaded to the layer 0 blockchain, which is Polkadot or Kusama. So you as like a blockchain don't have to worry about security.
Very cool. So will we be going there for sure?
I mean,
You don't
we
know,
it's
maybe.
like we'll see. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean like I see Kusama ecosystem as very like developer focused. There's a
Mm.
lot of like developers that like to geek out, and I mean you know, you don't want to fuck with developers because they will get shit done. And
Yeah.
I believe in Kusama doing that.
Long the builders, as Fisk says.
And yeah, invest with the builders.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right, well, maybe we'll leave it there. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the community or, tell us about to kind of close out your thoughts?
Sure. The DAO is going through a reorganization. We've supported 120 contributors this past month.
That's a lot.
And yeah, that's a lot. And I think we're one of the biggest DAOs, if not the biggest DAO.
Yeah.
And we are in uncharted territories, like there is, we're defining the future of work as we speak. And I'm extremely grateful and honored to be working among some of the smartest people across engineering, marketing, policy, partnerships, design, product, talent, operations, the DAO has some of the smartest people that are giving their time and contributing their time to the DAO. And I feel like we can solve any problem because of that. And I'm extremely grateful for every single one of you in the DAO.
Thanks. I think people really like that. I didn't realize we were at 120. That is like crazy.
It's
It's like
crazy.
a it's like you're getting to like a medium-sized company, like
Yes.
oh,
Yes, exactly.
oh, I can't believe it. It seems so long ago there was like 40 of us or something, like less, maybe even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we were just fucking around, and then
But it's like if there is a need, someone just appears, right? Like an incubator, like
yep.
someone's like, "Oh, I've been doing some content, but I'm actually like worked in incubators and VCs for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to help with that?" I'm like, "Yes, I have no idea what I'm
Yeah.
doing." Like,
Yes, please.
yeah, it's like you need something and then it just appears. And there's like we're not constrained kind of by like because we're I think that's the most important part is that we're a currency, so people don't mind getting paid in our governance
Yep.
token, right?
Yeah.
Whereas and it's like, well, you can like dump your you know $2,000 of ohm you got because it's like got a trading volume of like so much.
It's like I hate ohm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think like the DAO members are like contributors are like the least likely to like dispose of their own, right? Because they're putting
diamond
their
hands
time
it.
on the line. Anyway, yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for like coming and talking to us. I know you're like always super busy and trying to like.
I love
get
this.
stuff
Thank you so
done.
much.
It's been very nice talking to you. All right, Omies. This conversation will come out on Monday the 22nd, and then on Wednesday this week we may be having a migration of Agora TV, and followed by another news of the week next Friday 26. Spaces are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays is Asia time, Thursdays is 3 p.m. Pacific, and we'll catch you next week.